The first use case you think about blockchain is payments, right? So that's the first thing you want to do, is show that you can secure a payment mechanism just like Visa, MasterCard, but much more secure, without middlemen, take away the fees, offers economies of scale. So the more people use it, the cheaper it gets. The way we view the future of value in the long term, 3 to 5 to 10 years, we view layer 1 blockchains will essentially become like the new republics. These will be the new mechanisms where all the value is going to proliferate to. In the future, there will be the layer 1 blockchain, there will be the mining market, there'll be the dApps, and there'll be tokens. So the lower you get in the stack, the lower risk you have, but the lower rewards. The highest risk reward will be on the layer 1 blockchain, because that's where all the value will flow up. But it's highest value, highest risk. We view layer 1 blockchains, which is Bitcoin, Syscoin, Ethereum, as court systems. They need to be combative to the external forces that we don't control, even in the software world. In the real world, like inflation, hyperinflation, wars, these systems need to be secure from that. And this is why we view Bitcoin as the gold standard for security and decentralization. What else does the world need? What else does the world cherish when you have something like Bitcoin? How can we extend that to something else where we can take advantage to build real world utility? This is where Ethereum comes in. For me, Ethereum is a gold standard for flexibility or general computation. We're trying to stick to the gold standards we know the world's going to cherish and develop on, and we put those two concepts together. And this is what Syscoin is.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. In case you didn't know, I am
that Hotep Jesus dude. That Hotep, 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 that Hotep Jesus dude.
I am that Hotep Jesus dude.
Hotep.
Hotep to the fam. Hope everyone's doing well. Shout out to our sponsor, Syscoin. Syscoin, with the recent crypto dip, is holding its value. It's holding on tight. I got it. I ended up downloading the new iOS 16, so I got Syscoin right on my home screen, so I know what the price is, and it's holding steady at 17 cents. It's holding steady. Last week's low, I believe, was 13, so we're still up off that low. If you bought it that low when I told you I was buying, you're a happy camper right now. Welcome. Congratulations. This is not financial advice. Shout out to Syscoin, a paid sponsor of this channel. Without further ado, let's just hop right into today's presentation. I don't want to waste any time. We have set a precedent. The president has set a precedent. The president has set a precedent. Okay, good. Just want to make sure my highlights are still there. Let me just organize my screens. If you drop super chats, I will read them at the end. And appreciate anybody supporting the channel. As you see, we reinvest the money back into the channel to make this thing bigger, better, badder. We'll read those off, answer questions, and comments, concerns via super chats. Shout out to anybody who supports via Cash App. Shout out to Renee Vogel. He's clipped out done some amazing work with my clips for social media, my reels. And I appreciate you, Renee Vogel. Thank you very much. So let's dive right into it. Fact sheet. White House releases first ever comprehensive framework for responsible development of digital assets. I'm going to try and run through this presentation as fast as possible, but we are going to buckle your boots. We're going to be here for a little while. Got a lot of information to cover. The digital assets. Also, the companion. If you don't have a copy, get a copy of the Patriot Report, Unmasked the Conspiracy of Money and War. If you have your copy, go grab your copy now and follow along. I know many of you have a copy of the Patriot Report. Go grab it. Open it up. Get ready, because we are going to go over some things, that some important chapters in his book that relate to this. This is why I wrote the book, so people can be privy to some of the financial things happening in our lives. It says the digital assets market has grown significantly in recent years. Millions of people globally, including 16% of adult Americans, have purchased digital assets, which reached a market capitalization of $3 trillion globally last November. Digital assets present potential opportunities to reinforce U.S. leadership in the global financial system. So this is all about making sure that the USD, the US dollar, is still the world reserve currency and remain at the technological frontier. But they also pose real risks, as evidenced by recent events in crypto markets. The May crash of a so-called stablecoin and a subsequent wave of insolvencies wiped out over $600 billion of investor and consumer funds. If anybody knows anything about that story, there's a lot of speculation, and it says that the establishment actually caused that crash of, I think it was Luna. Don't quote me. Let's continue. So it says here, President Biden's March 9 is the day that Biggie Smalls died. I'm not sure if that relates here for any reason. Executive order on ensuring responsible development of digital assets outlined the first whole of government approach to addressing the risks and harnessing the potential benefits of digital assets and their underlying technology. Over the past 6 months, agencies across the government have worked together to develop frameworks and policy recommendations that advance the 6 key priorities identified in the EO. Consumer and investor protection, promoting financial stability, countering illicit finance, U.S. leadership in the global financial system, again, USD, world reserve currency, and economic competitiveness. Financial inclusion. This is that whole idea of, we have to get minorities in. So they're targeting the lower class, the middle class, as Bolsheviks tend to do, and responsible innovation. Now, Kumar Daniel has also dropped some supplementary information, which I will pull up now. Let's see here. Don't look at my notes. So you'll see here trending on menoforder.com is Project Hamilton, Bitcoin's evil brother. This is supplementary reading. I suggest you guys go through and read this. I covered this a little while back, and this is need to know information. So we're going to stop right here, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to open up a copy of our book, The Patriot Report. And we are going to turn, I'm going to tell you right now, to page 58. Get your copy, open it up to page 58. If you don't have a copy, you will not be able to follow along in many presentations we do in regards to money, because we always refer back to this report. We're going to grab your copy and pull it out to page 58. Okay. We're going to go to the bottom of page 58. And in this regard, we're talking about, this is the chapter on the first Bank of the United States. And this is an argument that's happening between Jefferson and Hamilton. And this is the argument that Hamilton makes. He says, no society could succeed which did not unite the interest and credit of rich individuals with those of the state. No society could succeed which did not unite the interest of credit of rich individuals with those of the state. Now, if you know anything about the 10 planks of Marxism, that comes right out of the 10 planks of Marxism: centralization of credit within the hands of the state. Straight out of Marx's playbook. Alexander Hamilton is completely in line with Marx. All communities divide themselves into the few and the many. The first are rich and well-born, the others the mass of people. He says right here, this is the important part I want you to pay attention to. He says the people are turbulent and changing. They seldom judge or determine right. This is out of Arthur. You see the footnote here, The Age of Jackson. And the author here says Hamilton basically believed that people couldn't be trusted to manage their own money. Therefore, they deserve to serve a money master. Who would argue that without the ability to, I'm sorry. I would argue that without the ability to fail, one may never learn the lessons which give them priceless experience. Very important. Very important. So let's come back. So that's what they want to say here is they want to protect the consumer and the investor because, according to Hamilton, they seldom judge right. We have to think for these people. We cannot allow people to think for themselves. We cannot allow people to fail on their own. Imagine if we coddled our children like this, they would never, ever grow. And that's part of this. This is part of them not wanting people to grow. You have to make mistakes. You have to fail to grow. Let's continue. Says here, the 9 reports submitted to the president to date. Hold on, let me align this with, I want to align this. Okay, good. That's how it looks on my screen. I just want to make sure what I see is what you see. Wonderful. The 9 reports submitted to the president to date, consistent with the executive order's deadlines, reflect the input and expertise of diverse stakeholders across government, industry, academia, and civil society. Together, they articulate a clear framework for responsible digital asset development and pave the way for further action at home and abroad. The reports call on agencies to promote innovation by kickstarting private sector research and development and helping cutting-edge U.S. firms find footholds in global markets. At the same time, they call for measures to mitigate the downside risks, like increased enforcement of existing laws. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Crow Joe is back. Ladies and gentlemen, mass incarceration Joe is back. Crime Bill Joe is back. This is going to be a massive inflation of the police state. Let's come back. And the creation of common sense efficiency standards for cryptocurrency mining, recognizing the potential benefits and risks. Apparently, they say they're going to warn us about risks of their CBDC, of a central bank digital currency. If you want to know more about the central bank digital currency, don't forget I told you, go to menoforder.com. It's a wonderful article on there. And menoforder.com is a no BS source for all things men, especially for young men looking to gain some money and power. Get in tune. Experimentation and evaluation and call for the creation of a Treasury-led interagency working group to support the Federal Reserve's efforts. So the first section here is protecting consumers, investors, and businesses. Digital assets pose meaningful risk for consumers, investors, and businesses. Prices of these assets can be highly volatile. The current global market cap of cryptocurrencies is approximately 1/3 of its November 2021 peak. Now, I highlighted this because they make it seem like the digital asset market is so dangerous, as if the financial instruments that they've created are not dangerous, as if we didn't have so many booms and bust cycles because of decisions made by the Fed, as illustrated by the Patriot Report, Unmasking the Conspiracy of Money and War. They make it seem like the 2008 housing crisis didn't happen because of their doing. But these digital assets, they're so dangerous. Still, sellers commonly mislead consumers about digital assets, features, and expected returns, and noncompliance with applicable laws and regulations remains widespread. One study found that almost a quarter of digital offerings had a disclosure or transparency problems, like plagiarized documents or false promises of guaranteed returns. I'm sure we had many promises that the American government promised us and failed on, but let's continue. Outright fraud, scams, and theft in digital asset markets are on the rise. According to FBI statistics, reported monetary losses from digital asset scams were nearly 600% higher in 2021 than the year before. Well, maybe because a lot of people came into the space. Duh. Anyway, since taking office, The Biden-Harris administration and independent regulators have worked to protect consumers and ensure fair play in digital asset markets by issuing guidance. And we're going to see it right here, increasing enforcement resources. Alex Jones been told you, police state, one world currency. Let's continue. And aggressively pursuing fraudulent actors. As outlined in the reports released today, the administration plans to take the following additional steps. It says here, the reports encourage regulators like the SEC and the CFTC, consistent with their mandates, to aggressively pursue investigations and enforcement actions against unlawful practices in the digital asset space. Again, gross inflation of the police state as predicted by Alex Jones. Let's continue. The reports encourage the CFPB and the FTC, as appropriate, to redouble their efforts to monitor consumer complaints and to enforce against unfair, deceptive, and abusive practices. The reports encourage agencies to issue guidance and rules to address current and emergent risks in the digital asset ecosystem. Regulatory and law enforcement agencies are also urged to collaborate to address acute digital asset risks facing consumers, investors, and businesses. In addition, agencies are encouraged to share data on consumer complaints regarding digital assets, ensuring each agency's activities are maximally effective. The FLEC will lead public awareness efforts to help consumers understand the risks involved with digital assets, identify common fraudulent practices, and learn how to report misconduct. Snitching. Let me show you how to snitch. Promoting access to safe, affordable financial services. Today, traditional finance leaves too many behind. Roughly 7 million Americans have no bank account. Now, they admit this. Traditional finance leaves too many behind. But we have to be careful of with government is when they admit a fault, it's because they're trying to implement something that's going to probably be worse than its predecessor. So they're saying traditional finance leaves too many behind. So they're going to say, well, we failed you we failed servicing the lower class with our traditional banking mechanisms. So this new one, this is going to be much better for you. Roughly 7 million Americans have no bank account. Another 24 million rely on costly non-bank services like check cashing and money orders for everyday needs. And for those who do use banks, paying with traditional financial infrastructure can be costly and slow, particularly for cross-border payments. What I'd like to know is, why are people using check cashing and money orders? Why? There's a reason. And don't say it's because of illegal money. No, it's because the traditional banking systems have failed them. It's because they have failed them. And we're going to dive into privacy in just a moment here. It says the digital economy should work for all Americans. That means developing financial services that are secure, reliable, affordable, and accessible to all to make payments more efficient. The Federal Reserve has planned the 2023 launch of FedNow, an instantaneous 24/7 interbank clearing system that will further advance nationwide infrastructure for instant payments alongside the clearinghouse's real-time payment system. Some digital assets could help facilitate faster payments and make financial services more accessible, but more work is needed to ensure they truly benefit underserved consumers and do not lead to predatory financial practices. So again, they're targeting the lower class here. I think some people will call them minorities or something like that, but they're targeting the lower class here. Now, it also says here, some digital assets could help facilitate faster payments. What digital assets are they talking about? Are they saying this is where the CBDC is going to come into play? So really what this means is, or how I'm interpreting it, and feel free to correct me if you think I'm wrong, but the FedNow is going to be the back end of the new CBDC. This is going to be the back end. If anybody knows anything about tech, you got a back end and a front end. This feels like this is going to be the back end, the things we won't see. Let's continue. Like I said, I want to go through this quickly because we have a lot of information to cover. To promote safe and affordable financial services for all, the administration plans to take the following steps. Thank you for that super chat. We'll get the super chats at the end. Thank you very much. Agencies will encourage the adoption of instant payment systems like FedNow. FedNow. There's so much wrong with this Fed now. Let's think about it as far as food. Get fed now. It's giving me communist vibes. Fed now. It's giving me very communist vibes. By supporting the development and use of innovative technologies by payment providers to increase access to instant payments and using instant payment systems for their own transactions where appropriate. For example, in the context of distribution of disaster, emergency, or other consumer, or other government to consumer payments. You guys see that right there? What do you guys think that is? What do you think that is? Other government to consumer payments. Basically, what they're saying is, any type of financial aid that comes from the government, welfare, etc., is going to come in the form of these digital assets. And if you read the article here on Men of Order, you can see how that could hurt the lower class because they have the ability to seize your funds or determine where or when these funds are actually valid. See, now some people are taking their EBT cards and, selling them or just buying, lobster and shrimp with them or whatever. Well, guess what? When they start issuing the CBDC, they're going to tell you what you can and cannot buy with it. You will be buying government cheese with your commie coins, with your Fed Now coins. That's what's going to happen here. And the other thing we have to look at is UBI, Universal Basic Income, probably one of the most malignant and odious policies that could ever be implemented. Socialist, communist policies that could ever be implemented is UBI, Universal Basic Income, basically payments to all. I guess you got a qualifier or something like that, but payments to all. And we're going to talk about inflation and how they're going to try and sidestep inflation with this new digital currency. You'll see in just a moment. The president will also consider agency recommendations to create a federal framework to regulate non-bank payment providers. So if you're not a bank and you're handling payments, they're going to regulate that too. So you thought you were going to be a competitor to PayPal? Guess again, federal framework's going to take a look at that. If you were doing this, non-bank payment providers, if you were doing this with digital assets, be careful. Agencies will prioritize efforts to improve the efficiency of cross-border payments by working to align global payments practices. See the word global there. This is the one world digital currency that Alex Jones warned us about, I believe. It's what I'm speculating here. By working to align. So when they say align global payments practices, regulations, and supervision protocols, while exploring new multilateral platforms that integrate instant payment systems. This is going to put us all on the same currency, potentially. At least all on the same system. Something like, I guess, SWIFT, but at the next level. The National Science Foundation, NSF, will back research in technical and socio-technical disciplines and behavioral economics to ensure that digital asset ecosystems are designed to be usable, inclusive, equitable, and accessible by all. Fostering financial stability. So this is digital assets in the mainstream financial system are becoming increasingly intertwined, creating channels for turmoil to have spillover effects. Stablecoins in particular could create disruptive runs if not paired with appropriate regulation. Now, stablecoins, as you know, are basically like a competitor to the US dollar. This is what they really want to come after. This is one of their competitors, the stablecoins. They don't want stablecoins. They are going to erase the stablecoin market, I'm speculating, and replace it with their own stablecoin. The potential for instability was illustrated in May 2022 by the crash of the so-called Terra. Yeah, this is Terra Luna. That's what I was talking about earlier. Terra Luna USD and the subsequent wave of insolvencies that erased nearly $600 billion in wealth. In October, the Financial Stability Oversight Committee, FSOC, will publish a report discussing digital assets, financial stability risks, identifying related regulatory gaps, and making additional recommendations to foster financial stability. Now, FSOC, I highlighted FSOC because it reminded me of INGSOC. English Socialism from the book by George Orwell, 1984, which is also a must read. FSOC. This could even be, federal socialism is what this could potentially stand for. Financial Stability Oversight Council. Oversight. Big Brother. Let's continue. The Biden-Harris administration has long recognized the need for regulation to address digital assets stability risk. For example, in 2021, the president's working group on financial markets recommended steps for Congress and regulators to make stablecoins safer. Building on this framework, the administration plans to take the additional following steps. The Treasury will work with financial institutions to bolster their capacity to identify and mitigate cyber vulnerabilities by sharing information and promoting a wide range of data sets and analytical tools. The Treasury will work with other agencies to identify, track, and analyze emerging strategic risks that relate to digital asset markets. It will also collaborate on identifying such risks with U.S. allies, including through international organizations like the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and the Financial Stability Board. So again, more globalism. Advancing responsible innovation. U.S. companies lead the world in innovation. Digital asset firms are no exception. As of 2022, the United States is home of roughly half of the world's 100 most valuable financial tech companies, many of which trade in digital asset services. The U.S. government has long played a critical role in priming responsible private sector innovation. It sponsors cutting-edge research, helps firms compete globally, assist them with compliance, and works with them to mitigate harmful side effects of technological advancement. So we're going to come down here. We're just going to skip ahead. And as you see here, Department of Energy, the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, and other agencies will consider further tracking digital assets' environmental impacts, developing performance standards as appropriate, and providing local authorities with the tools, resources, and expertise to mitigate environmental harms. So basically, this is, even Bitcoin is not exempt from the climate change agenda and the whole carbon emission net zero campaign that the globalists are pushing. Let's go to the next section. It says reinforcing our global financial leadership competitiveness. They tell you right out, what they're doing. They just know that people won't read, so they can tell you exactly what they're doing. Today, global standard setting bodies are establishing policies and guidance and regulatory recommendations for digital assets. The United States is working actively with its partners to set out these policies in line with our goals and values, while also reinforcing the United States' role in the global financial system. Similarly, the United States has a valuable opportunity to partner with countries still developing their digital asset ecosystems. What do you think this is? What do you think this is? Developing nations, third world countries, digital asset ecosystems. They're going to bring CBDCs to third world countries. Jamaica has already experienced this. I'll show you, because seeing is believing. All I'm going to do is I'm going to type in CBDC Jamaica, and I'll hit the news tab here. Well, here's an article. Here's one here from 24/7 Wall Street. Looks like some more countries have joined. As you see here, it says Brazil and India join CBDC race. Will start pilot projects. Brazil plans to join the race. As per data by the American think tank Atlantic Council, a total of 11 countries have launched a digital currency, which includes countries like the Bahamas, China, Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, and which launched its CBDC in October 2021. So Nigeria, I'm sorry, I apologize. Nigeria has a CBDC. Jamaica is the latest country to launch a CBDC called the Jamdex. So Jamaica has a CBDC, so they've gotten it in there. And the G20 is looking to expand it some more. So let's continue. It says U.S. agencies will leverage U.S. positions in internal organizations to message U.S. values related to digital assets. So this right here is when you talk about messaging and digital assets. The they're basically saying, these are the agencies that are going to handle our propaganda. This is their propaganda campaign that they're saying they're going to push. It says right here, U.S. agencies will leverage U.S. positions in internal organizations to message U.S. values related to digital assets. So they're going to dictate the messaging. They're just going to dictate what people think or how they think about digital assets like cryptocurrency, especially when it comes to theirs. U.S. agencies will also continue and expand their leadership roles on digital assets, work at international organizations and standard setting bodies such as G7, G20, OECD, FSB, FATF, and the International Organization for Standardization. Agencies will promote standards, regulations, and frameworks that reflect values like data privacy, and efficient markets, financial stability, consumer protection, robust law enforcement, and environmental stability. I think there was a point I wanted to make here, but I think it pops up later on. So let's continue. It says the State Department and Department of Justice and other U.S. enforcement agencies will increase collaboration with and assistance to partner agencies in foreign countries through global enforcement bodies like the Egmont Group, bilateral information sharing and capacity building. If you saw my appearance on Gutfeld, I talk about the potential for a global police body. Here we have global enforcement bodies right here in the White House's new document. The State Department, Treasury, USAID, and other agencies will explore further technical assistance to, again here, developing countries. We just talked about that, building out digital asset infrastructure and services. So they're going to make sure that the rest of the world follows along with this so-called cutting edge U.S. financial technology. So here it says fighting illicit finance. And this is where we're going to pull our book out. We're going to pull out a copy of our Patriot Report. And we're going to do a lot of reading now from the Patriot Report, almost the entire chapter. It says United States has been a leader in applying its anti-money laundering and countering the financial, the financing of terrorism, AML, CFT, framework in the digital asset ecosystem. It has published relevant guidance, engaged in regular public and private dialogue, used its enforcement tools, and led in setting international AML CFT standards. While our efforts have strengthened the U.S. financial system, digital assets, some of which are pseudonymous. Okay, this part is interesting, and can be transferred without financial intermediary, have been exploited by bad actors to launder illicit proceeds. While efforts have strengthened the U.S. financial system digital assets, some of which are pseudonymous. So basically, like, you'll be anonymous maybe to other people, but you won't be anonymous to the people behind the curtain, is how I'm interpreting this. Let's continue. Have been exploited by bad actors to launder illicit proceeds, to finance terrorism and the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Like, we didn't just send a whole bunch of weapons of mass destruction to the Ukraine, and to conduct a wide array of other crimes. For example, digital assets have facilitated the rise of ransomware, cyber criminals, narcotics sales, and money laundering for drug trafficking organizations, and the funding of activities of rogue regimes, as was the case in the recent thefts of Democratic People's Republic affiliated Lazarus Group. Okay, let's continue. So here is the part where we're going to take a quick segue and then come back to this document. And it says right here, the president will evaluate whether to call upon Congress to amend the Bank Secrecy Act. So now we go to our book, and we're going to navigate. So they said the Bank Secrecy Act. In this report, you will see there's a chapter right here. It says the Bank Secrecy Act of 1970. Hopefully everybody has. Let me just make sure I got this on your screen, as you should be able to see it. Oops, sorry. Wait, whoops. Come on, stop it. Okay. All right. Cool. Bank Secrecy Act of 1970. Banker Secrecy Act, or BSA, or otherwise known as the Currency and Foreign Transactions Reporting Act, or the Anti-Money Laundering Law, AML, was allegedly designed to prevent criminals from using financial institutions to hide or launder their illegal gains. The law requires financial institutions, a very broad term, to submit documentation to FinCEN, a borough within the Department of Treasury, for cash transactions over $10,000. Thank you for the super chat. We'll get to them at the end. In my opinion, there are a few things wrong here. Why does the government have a monopoly on business? Why do they get to choose what is legal and what is illegal business? And when they refer to cash gains as being hidden, what they're really saying is you have no right to privacy. At first glance, I thought this was a direct violation of the Fourth Amendment, so I started digging to see if anyone else supported my claim. Here's a microcosm of what I found. United States versus Miller. Mr. Miller was running an illegal whiskey distillery, which after a fire broke out, police discovered 175 gallons of non-tax paid whiskey. Federal agents sent subpoenas for Miller's bank records, to which the bank complied, and resulted in Miller being indicted for tax evasion. Miller requested to have the banking records suppressed, but this was denied in the Georgia District Court. Miller filed for an appeal, and the Fifth Circuit ruled in his favor, but he would ultimately lose when the case went to the Supreme Court. Even though he lost his case in the Supreme Court, I'd like to cite the dissenting records from Justice Brennan and Justice Marshall. Justice Brennan quotes Justice Mosk from the Court of Appeals, and Justice Mosk said, "It is not the right of privacy of the bank, but of the petitioner, which is at issue, and thus it would be untenable to conclude that the bank, a neutral entity with no significant interest in the matter, may validly consent to an invasion of its depositors' rights." Justice Brennan says the circuit court reversed the conviction. It held that the defendant's rights under the Fourth Amendment were violated by the search because a subpoena was issued by the United States attorney rather than by a court or grand jury, and the bank's voluntary compliance with the subpoena was irrelevant since it was the depositor's right to privacy which was threatened by the disclosure. It continues, for all practical purposes, the disclosure by individuals or business firms of financial affairs to a bank is not entirely volitional, since it is impossible to participate in the economic life of contemporary society without maintaining a bank account. To permit a police officer access to these records merely upon his request without any judicial control as to the relevancy or other traditional requirements of legal process, and to allow the evidence to be used in any subsequent criminal prosecution against the defendant, opens the door to a vast and unlimited range of very real abuses of police power. Financial transactions can reveal much about a person's activities, associations, and beliefs. At some point, governmental intrusion upon these areas would implicate legitimate expectations of privacy. Now I'll include the dissenting judgment from Justice Marshall. While the Court of California's Bankers Association did not then purport to decide whether a customer could later challenge the bank's delivery of his records to the government pursuant to a subpoena, I warned. So he's citing himself in a previous case. And it says here, it is ironic that although the majority deems the bank customers' Fourth Amendment claims premature, it also intimates that once the bank has made copies of a customer's checks, the customer no longer has the standing to invoke the Fourth Amendment rights when a demand is made on the bank by the government for the records. By accepting the government's bifurcated approach to the record-keeping requirement and the acquisition of the records, the majority engages in a hollow charade whereby Fourth Amendment claims are to be labeled premature until such time as they can be deemed too late. So when he's talking about the majority, he's talking about the majority of the people that have voted against Mr. Miller. And he clearly calls him out. He calls him a hollow charade. And he's saying, yo, you're saying that he's supposed to invoke his Fourth Amendment rights, right? But you're saying it's premature. But by the time you done snoop through his stuff, it's already too late. So there's complete contradictions here. This was an incisive observation from Justice Marshall. He points out that on one hand, the Fourth Amendment is irrelevant, but when the court deems it is relevant, yet too late. Justice Marshall concludes, I wash my hands of today's extended redundancy by the court because the record-keeping requirements of the Act order the seizure of customers' bank records without a warrant and probable cause. I believe the Act is unconstitutional and that respondent has standing to raise that claim. Since the Act is unconstitutional, the government cannot rely on records kept pursuant to it in prosecuting bank customers. The government relied on such records in this case. And because of that, I would affirm the Court of Appeals reversal of respondent's conviction. I respectfully dissent. Next, we'll look at California Bankers Association versus Schultz, since that's the one that Justice Marshall was invoking here. So Justice Douglas' dissenting remarks includes the following text. I'm not yet ready to agree that America is so possessed with evil that we must level all constitutional barriers to give our civil authorities the tools to catch criminals. So he's saying they have leveled the Constitution in order to catch a few criminals. A mandatory record keeping of all telephone conversations would be better than the recording of checks under the Bank Secrecy Act if Big Brother is to have his way. He said, recording everyone's telephone conversations would be better than snooping on their bank statements. Wow. He continues, in a sense, a person is defined by the checks he writes. By examining them, the agents get to know his doctors, lawyers, creditors, political allies, social connections, religious affiliation, educational interests, the papers and magazines he reads, and so on ad infinitum. It is, I submit, sheer nonsense to agree with the Secretary that all bank records of every citizen have a high degree of usefulness in criminal, tax, or regulatory investigations or proceedings. That is unadulterated nonsense, unless we are to assume that every citizen is a crook, an assumption I cannot make. This is straight out of the Patriot Report. Jeremy says he needs to get a copy of it. Yes, you do. Since the banking transactions of an individual give a fairly accurate account of his religion, ideology, opinions, and interests, a regulation impounding them and making them automatically available to all federal investigative agencies is a sledgehammer approach to a problem that only a delicate scalpel can manage. He continues, suppose Congress passed a law requiring telephone companies to record and retain all telephone calls and make them available to any federal agency on request. Would we hesitate even for a moment before striking it down? I think not. We condemned in the United States versus the U.S. District Court the broad and unsuspected governmental incursions into conversational privacy with electronic surveillance entails, electronic surveillance entails. He says we basically covered it here, so what are we doing? The Fourth Amendment warrant requirements may be removed by constitutional amendment, but they certainly cannot be replaced by the Secretary of Treasury's finding that certain information will be highly useful in criminal, tax, or regulatory investigations or proceedings. As you can see, our Constitution has already been annihilated. You think you're free? Oh boy, we got a lot of work to do. Justice Brennan's dissenting remarks include the following text. Now, just to give people a little background, when I did my research, I did pull the actual verbiage from the hearings to get these quotes, and I suggest you read them. Not only are the reporting and record keeping requirements functionally inseparable, but the reporting provisions impose additional requirements, thus adding to the power of the secretary to invade individual rights. In the case of the Bank Secrecy Act, also potentially involving First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendment rights of the vast majority of our citizenry, it exceeds, I repeat, it exceeds Congress's constitutional power of delegation to empower the Secretary of Treasury to require whatever reports and records he believes to be possessed of a high degree of usefulness, where the purpose is to further criminal, tax, and regulatory investigations or proceedings. Justice Marshall's dissenting remarks include the following text. In my view, this attempt to acquire private papers constitutes a search and seizure under the Fourth Amendment. I'm going to give you some homework before I continue reading. I want you guys to go and look up these cases, and I want you to see who voted which way. Who voted to annihilate our Fourth Amendment rights? And then relay that information to me. I'd love to have it. I haven't had a chance to go look it up yet. As this court settled long ago in Boyd versus United States, a compulsory production of a man's private papers to establish a criminal charge against him is within the scope of the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. By compelling an otherwise unwilling bank to photocopy the checks of its customers, the government has as much of a hand in seizing those checks as if it had forced a private person to break into the customer's home or office and photocopy the checks there. See Byers versus the United States. As we emphasized in Katz versus the United States, the absence of any physical seizure of tangible property does not foreclose Fourth Amendment inquiry. The majority argues that Fourth Amendment claim is premature, since the act itself only affects the keeping of records and in no way changes the law regarding acquisition of the records by the government. I cannot agree. This attempt to bifurcate the acquisition of information into two independent and unrelated steps is wholly unrealistic. Maybe I should break that down for some people. I know we have a younger audience here. So basically what they're saying is because you've signed on with the bank and because this bank is keeping records, you've already forked over your Fourth Amendment rights because they exist in some record somewhere and those records aren't in your possession. But as the other justice had mentioned, you can't get around that. How do you operate in the United States without a bank account? You can't. It's impossible. So let's continue. If these customers' Fourth Amendment claims cannot be raised now, they cannot be raised at all. Congress may well have been correct in concluding that law enforcement would be facilitated by the dragnet requirements of this act. Those who wrote our Constitution, however, recognized more important values. I respectfully dissent. I strongly urge you to read the entire transcript of the case law provided above to empower you to protect your constitutional rights and to understand how they can be interpreted and misinterpreted for or against your benefit. So that's another reason why I suggest you guys go read these cases to protect yourself, because you want to see the arguments that the justices used to take away your rights, so you can come up with better arguments to refute them, and also the arguments in your favor. Attorney Peter Van Valkenburg has a great document called Electronic Cash, Decentralized Exchange, and the Constitution. And this is on coincenter.org website. In his document, he recalls Berger versus New York. He quotes Justice Clark here. There's a lot of case law we're going through. This is very important. We cannot forgive the requirements of the Fourth Amendment in the name of law enforcement. It is not asking too much that officers be required to comply with the basic command of the Fourth Amendment before the innermost secrets of one's home or office are invaded. Few threats to liberty exist which are greater than that posed by the use of eavesdropping devices. Van Valkenburg then quotes the sarcastic dissenting remarks from Justice Douglas, and it says here, it would be highly useful to governmental espionage to have like reports from our bookstores, all our hardware and retail stores, all our drugstores. These records, too, might be useful in criminal investigations. He starts sarcastically dissents. Mr. Volkenberg appeared on Peter McCormick's What Bitcoin Did podcast, where he called into question the Bank Secrecy Act. He says, why is the Bank Secrecy Act constitutional if it allows regulators and law enforcement to go directly to a bank and collect all your private information without ever going to a judge and getting a warrant? After completing the above research, I realized that my notions were correct. The Bank Secrecy Act, at least partly, dissolves the Constitution and violates our God-given rights. Our privacy is not protected by the government, but instead is violated by the government. The Fourth Amendment has been virtually obliterated. So now that we've gone through that, let's go back now. Now we have to go back to Biden's document. And what does Biden's document say right here? We just got a thorough education on the Bank Secrecy Act. And what does it say here? The president will evaluate whether to call upon Congress to amend the Bank Secrecy Act. Jeremy Rhodes, thank you. He said he just ordered the book on Amazon. Anti-tip-off statutes and laws against unlicensed money transmitting to apply explicitly the digital asset service providers, including digital asset exchanges and non-fungible token platforms, NFTs. He will also consider urging Congress to raise penalties for unlicensed money transmitting to match the penalties for similar crimes under other money laundering statutes and amend relevant federal statutes to let the Department of Justice prosecute digital asset crimes in any jurisdiction where a victim of those crimes is found. So imagine wanting to create your own money or becoming a middleman of money. Basically, they want a monopoly on who can be a middleman of money. You can't do it without their express written permission. Was there another thing here? Okay, no, we covered that. Cool. The United States will continue to monitor. Mass incarceration. I'm sorry. I wanted to reiterate that again. This is also mass incarceration. Increase in the police state. That's the point I wanted to make. The United States will continue to monitor the development of the digital asset sector and its associated illicit financing risks to identify any gaps in our legal, regulatory, and supervisory regimes. As part of this effort, Treasury will complete an illicit finance risk assessment on decentralized finance by the end of February 2023, and assessment on NFTs by July 2023. So put that on your calendar. We're expecting a full report and risk assessment on cryptocurrency early 2023. Trump can't come fast enough. Pause. Relevant departments and agencies will continue to expose and disrupt illicit actors and address the abuse of digital assets. Such actions will hold cyber criminals and other malign actors responsible for their illicit activity and identify nodes in the ecosystem that pose national security risks. So again, more police authority. Let's skip down. So here's the section on the CBDC. And it says here, exploring a U.S. central bank digital currency, CBDC. So this is the last paragraph here, last section here. They're talking about the central bank digital currency. Now let's pay attention here. This is a very dense paragraph and potent. A digital form of the U.S. dollar. A digital form of the U.S. dollar has the potential to offer significant benefits, they claim. It could enable a payment system that is more efficient, provides a foundation for further technological innovation, facilitates faster cross-border transactions, and is environmentally sustainable. Okay. It could promote financial inclusion and equity by enabling access for a broad set of consumers. So again, This is for the lower class. They are targeting the lower class with this CBDC. As if the lower class hasn't been through enough, they're targeting the lower class with it. Inclusion and equity. Niggas, black folks. Let's continue. In addition, it could foster economic growth and stability. Now, remember I told you we were going to talk about this. So, Cyprian talks about how with their cryptocurrency, because it'll be so private, we won't actually know how much money is in circulation or not in circulation, because it'll all be digital and all be private. So he's saying essentially inflation would be eliminated. I suggest going to Cyprian, signing up for BitcoinMysterySchool.com and get educated on cryptocurrency by the world's foremost guru on the matter, Cyprian. It's at BitcoinMysterySchool.com. Economic growth and stability, right? So this here is them saying we can use this coin to stabilize the economy, control the economy. This is communism. It's a centralization of power. It's a centralization of credit within the hands of the state. This is centralized decision making. This is price controls. Everything that you're not supposed to do. Anyway, protect against cyber and operational risks, more mass incarceration, safeguard the privacy of sensitive data. So here they claim that they care about the privacy of your data. Meanwhile, they want to amend the Bank Secrecy Act. Now, this privacy and sensitive data is them basically having, if anybody knows anything about Bitcoin has a public blockchain. You can see all the transactions publicly on the blockchain, all transactions. This is going to be, if they even use blockchain technology, which they probably won't. Some people speculate. We will not know. We will not know the checks and balances of the Federal Reserve Bank. And minimize risk of illicit financial transactions. A potential U.S. CBDC, central bank digital currency, could also help preserve U.S. global financial leadership. So they're very much an interest, because they know the way their dollar is operating right now, it's dying and people are losing trust in it and confidence. They want to maintain the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. So that's a big part of this as well. And with the ability to hide their ideas. Hey, can y'all, anybody shilling shitcoins? Just ban them. No shilling shitcoins in my, if it's not Syscoin, you can't shill shitcoins in here, especially not XRP. Thank you, mods. Could also help preserve U.S., and I'll get to super chats in a moment, and support the effectiveness of sanctions. But a CBDC could also have unintended consequences, including runs to CBDC in times of stress. Unintended consequences. They always cover their ass and tell you, well, we told you it could have had unintended consequences when, shit hits the fan. Recognizing the possibility of a U.S. CBDC, central bank digital currency, the administration has developed policy objectives for a U.S. CBDC system, which reflect the federal government's priorities for potential U.S. CBDC. These objectives flesh out the goals outlined in the CBDC and the EO. A U.S. CBDC system, if implemented, should protect consumers, promote economic growth, improve payment systems, provide interoperability with other platforms, advance financial inclusion, again, lower class, protect national security, respect human rights, and align with democratic values. If you've watched my previous videos, you know how I feel about the word democracy. But further research and development on the technology that would support U.S. CBDC is needed. The administration encourages the Federal Reserve to continue its ongoing CBDC research, experimentation, and evaluation to support the Federal Reserve's efforts and to advance other work on potential U.S. CBDC. The Treasury will lead an interagency working group, so this is the U.S. Treasury, to consider the potential implications of a U.S. CBDC, leverage cross-government technical expertise, and share information with partners. The leadership of the Federal Reserve, the National Economic Council, National Security Council, the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and the Treasury Department will meet regularly to discuss the working group's progress and share updates on CBDC and other payment innovations. In conclusion, too long didn't read. What we are facing here is a potential one world digital currency, a slave coin, Fed coin. This will also potentially be used for universal basic income, that laying the groundwork for universal basic income. Some places have already installed UBI. We're seeing a massive inflation of the police state, gross negligence of our constitutional rights, specifically the Fourth Amendment, due to the Bank Secrecy Act of 1970, as covered in the Patriot Report. Hotep's been warned you. I put this information out. I think I dropped this book 2 years ago, I believe. I don't actually remember. Maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. But I published this book because, and I named it the Patriot Report because patriots, if you care about this country, you need to read this report. You need to have a copy of this report to understand the implications of the eradication of your constitutional rights and how money has been used as a tool to enslave, also to bring about war, because there's a lot in this document about war, because you can't have money without war. They just seem to go hand in hand. Central banking information also in this document. Sergeant Hoddle, he said, "Dear Lord, don't tell me the dementia god is screwing up crypto now. This guy really is ruining everything. It's ridiculous." Yeah. SMS for who? Thank you for the super chat. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a wonderful presentation. Make sure you go get a copy of the Patriot Report. I will put a link in the description box below. Yeah, I'll put it in the description box below. So anyone who wants it, you can just type in hotepjesus.com. You'll see it on my website there as well. But I'll go ahead and yeah, it's not in the description, so I'll put it in the description box below. You'll see it. It'll say the Patriot Report. All right, that's been updated and it's there now. Ladies and gentlemen, please educate yourself. Arm yourself with the case law knowledge that's in this document. Arm yourself with the arguments made by some of our good Supreme Court leaders, Supreme Court justices. Identify which Supreme Court justices have failed us in the past. Identify their family lineages. Let's see if any of them are still sitting on the Supreme Court. And use this to arm yourselves with the defenses of any future decisions that could be made by a Supreme Court. And let's try to get as many constitutional justices on the board of the Supreme Court ASAP.
Hotep
And Bill.